Hey guys, it's me again. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to cover topic 2 of biology, that's classification. So don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and even leave your comments on areas maybe you want us to cover in the near future. So welcome. Now we are going to cover the topic of classification 1, that is in the second topic in Form 1. We are going to cover introduction. We are going to cover the magnifying lens, the importance of classification, units of classification, and binomial nomenclature. And then we'll be good to go. So let's start with the introduction to classification. So biology, classification. Classification 1. So we start off with what is classification now. So classification is a very simple term. Classification is basically the process of placing organisms into groups. It's mainly based on their external characteristics, but you can just say it's the process of placing organisms into groups based on their characteristics. So that's the definition for classification. So just generally placing organisms into groups. Organisms into groups. So that's generally the definition for classification. So now the classification, we are going to look at these groups. What are these groups? So a group in which organisms are placed is called a taxon. A taxon. That's one group. If they are many, you call them taxa. So this is singular and this is plural. Taxon, taxa. So that's basically a group and groups. And now what about taxonomy now? Taxonomy now, it's a study. You see, it's ending with Y. It's a study. So it's the scientific study of classification. Scientific study of classification. That's a taxonomy now. It's taxonomy. So I think we are good. Classification placing organisms to groups according to their characteristics. Taxon is one group, many groups are taxa. Taxonomy is the scientific study of classification. And now we move on to, in classification we are going to use a very important instrument, and that's the magnifying lens. So first of all, we studied this in our last, if you have not watched the other video, you can go watch. On the introduction to biology, we touched on the magnifying lens. So what's a magnifying lens? Magnifying lens. What's a magnifying lens? So magnifying lens is basically just a lens used to make small objects appear larger for the basis of classification, or for the purposes of classification. That's the magnifying lens. So we are going to look at how you can use a magnifying lens. So generally it looks like this. I'm not a good drawer, but you can see it's something like this. Something of the sort. So this is the lens, this is the handle. So we are going to look on how to use this magnifying lens. So whenever you want to study a specimen, when you're using a magnifying lens, first of all you have a working table. So take a case, maybe it's a grasshopper. So you place the grasshopper on top of the working table or the working bench. Then using the magnifying lens, start from the specimen, lift it up like this until it comes into closer contact to your eyes. You'll see the image being enlarged up to maybe the point where you see the structures that you need to use, you need to identify, something like that. So that's the magnifying lens. Now, on magnification, we said magnification is the process which, like, you are making small objects to appear larger. So there's a formula we are going to use to calculate magnification. So assuming this is an atom. So I've just drawn it randomly here. It's another one. Maybe I saw it somewhere, but I've just drawn it. But then this is the drawing length. But now this is the actual length of the atom. Assuming now the atom looks like this, actually. It's a small one, maybe. Maybe that's the actual length. So you see, yes, this is the atom, the actual length, but this is the length that I've used to draw the atom. So now we are going to use a certain formula to calculate the magnification. By how much have we enlarged the object, or how much have we made it smaller. So in this case, this is the actual object and the drawn object now. So the drawn object appears larger than the actual object, or the actual organism. So to calculate magnification, we use this formula. Magnification is equals to magnification. And remember guys, whenever you are doing or you're tackling questions considering magnification, the formula always have 1 mark. So always remember to include the formula. Magnification equals to length of drawing, or drawing length, in other words, over actual length of the specimen. So length of drawing over the actual length of specimen. So if you look at this, for example, you see this is the length of drawing. Assuming from here to here we have 15 centimeter, but the actual organism is, let's say, 5 centimeter. So now magnification will be equals to the length of drawing is 15 centimeter divided by the actual length, which is 5 centimeter. So if you divide this one out, you get by 5.1 by 5.3 equals to 3. So you'll see that we've enlarged this image or this object by 3 times. The actual object is 5 centimeter, the drawing is 15 centimeter. So we've enlarged it 3 times. So that's the magnification. And remember, magnification doesn't have a unit because it's a ratio. We are dividing the length of drawing over the actual length of specimen. So maybe I hope you have noted that, and maybe now we can move on to something else. So we are done with the magnifying lens. Now that we are studying classification, you have to know how is it important. Why do you have to study classification? So classification has various importances, and we'll cover about 4 of them. Why is classification important? So I want us to take this scenario. Now assuming that you've not classified these organisms, and now you have the scientists, they are working, it's going to be very difficult for them to identify where exactly to locate the organism. So now, one importance of classification is that we put the organisms into groups to present them maybe in an orderly manner and reduce confusion that would arise were it to be done randomly or arbitrarily. So that's one importance of classification. Let's write importance of classification here. So guys, that's one importance of classification. To put organisms in an orderly manner hence reduce confusion that would arise were it to be done arbitrarily or randomly. So that's one importance of classification. Remember, when we put them in an orderly manner, now it's going to be very simple for the scientists to identify which organism are we talking about. That's one importance of classification. Another very important importance for classification is to be able to maybe understand the evolutionary relationship between organisms. Now remember guys, maybe in your history you also studied that man came from apes. So through classification like you can trace how has it come to a point that you can see there's a relationship between the ape and the man. So classification helps us to have that understanding of that evolutionary relationship. How did it evolve up to this point that it have reached by now? So to understand the evolutionary relationship between organisms, that's another very important importance of classification. So far we've covered 2 points on the importance of classification. Now we go to the third one. This is other one. To manage all, let's use another word, maybe to monitor. Monitor is better. To monitor appearance and disappearance of organisms. So that's another importance of classification. You'll be able to monitor, for example, at a time you'll get that there's a new species that is evolving. It wasn't there before. So through classification, you'll get to know where is it evolving from. So you can monitor its appearance. And at the same time, some animals are also going extinct. Let's take the case of the white rhino. It's almost going extinct. Not yet, but almost going extinct, the white rhino. So through classification, you can be able to monitor, like, these organisms had been there in abundant amount of them, but now it's reducing. So you can monitor the appearance and disappearance of a species or organisms. So that's another importance of classification. So now we move on to another area I want us to cover, and that will be units of classification. So obviously, if you are going to classify these organisms, you have to put them in an orderly manner. So that's why we have groups or units of classification. So there are several of them, and we are going to look at some few of them. So I'm going to just step back. Maybe you may need to take a screenshot of that before we move on to the units of classification now. Oh, and I forgot another importance of classification. Before I move on, classification can also be used to, to place organisms with same characteristics in the same group while differentiating them with those with different characteristics. So like it's generally can help to place organisms with same characteristics in the same group and hence differentiating them from with those with different characteristics now. So that's another importance of classification as well. So now let's move on to the units of classification. So now on the units of classification, you have to take in mind that now we have a lot of organisms in this world, and so it's necessary to have like those units, like broader units and smaller units. The units help to identify an organism. Maybe, for example, you can move from the group with the highest number of organisms, moving down until you locate the organism that you have a specific interest in. So now we have around I think 7 groups of units of classification. So I'm going to give you a formula that maybe will help you be able to identify the groups, because you may be asked to name all of them in an exam. So I'm going to give you a formula that will help you to maybe identify them in the order. So you have a formula like so this is the one I used to use when I'm in high school. Yeah, Kifiklavophages, just like that, Kifiklavophages. So this summarizes all those units of classification, because you may be required to name them in the orderly manner. So starting from there is here. This one starts for kingdom. Move down to phylum. Now phylum is for animals. In the case of plants, here we are going to call it division. So phylum stroke division. From there move down to here, class. That represents class. From class we move down to order. From order we move down to family. From family we move to genus. And from genus we move to species. So guys, these are all the units of classification in order, starting from the group or the unit of classification with the highest number of organisms, narrowing down until you locate the specific organism. Now the species specifies the specific organism we are talking about. So if you want to come and talk about maybe a specific organism or to identify it, you have to move all the way to the species to get your organism that you want to talk about. So that's kingdom, phylum, stroke division, class, order, family, genus, species. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 units of classification. So now from there, we are going to take a keen interest here in species, and also there is somehow here in the kingdom, the two, and maybe genus or genera in plural. As we progress, we're going to touch it on genus a little bit. So now let's start downwards. What is species? So now we've seen that this is the smallest unit of classification, because it will only have that one organism, like that one type of organism. If you move here, you get some more organisms which are related due to they have some more characteristics as compared to here. Here you get organisms some similar characteristics, but they are not many as compared to. Okay, let's see. Here you get organisms with a lot of organisms, but they share maybe several characteristics. Now you go to here to genus, like you get the organisms will get fewer, but they share a lot more, something like that. And go to the species, a specific organism now. Now let's talk about the species. What is a species? So a species, so just to mention maybe, in let's say in human beings, a species, you talk of it as being Homo sapiens. Then okay, let me just step down a little bit, maybe we'll go this one for a screenshot or something like that. So now we are talking about the species. So what is a species? First of all, we have said is the smallest unit of classification. And being the smallest unit of classification, now okay, in your exams you get something like define a species. So what do you say? So a species is a unit of classifications in which living organisms can freely interbreed to give rise to a fertile or a viable offspring. So take a keen look about this. So it's a unit of classification. That's the first thing. It's a unit of classification. And maybe let me write off the whole definition for it, because I'm sure it's gonna come in your exams mostly. So a unit of classification in which living organisms can freely, mark that word, freely, interbreed. Okay, another one that you can replace this one is naturally. So they can freely stroke naturally interbreed to give rise to a young one. Okay, let's talk of to a viable stroke fertile offspring. So that's the definition of a species. It's a unit of classification in which living organisms can freely interbreed to give rise to a viable stroke fertile offspring. For example, let's see a place like here. So the species, they can naturally interbreed to give rise to a viable offspring. But that doesn't mean that organisms that are not in the same species cannot interbreed. But now there'll be a problem. Have a look at this one. So a horse and a donkey, they are in the same genus, but in different species. A donkey in its own species and a horse in its own species. So the two organisms are closely related, but they are in different species. But now there comes a case when maybe a horse and a donkey interbreed. They will give rise to a new one, a young one. But that young one we'll call that a mule. A mule. M-U-L-E. It's a mule. So take a look that they have given rise to an offspring, despite that they are in different species. But now, what's the difference now? A mule is infertile. It can no longer produce. Yes, it will just die like that later because it can't produce to continue the generation. Why? Because it was as a result of interbreeding between two different species. That's the reason a mule is infertile. So that's basically about the species. Now let's go to kingdoms. So you're gonna also have to know the kingdoms that you're gonna look at. So let's just mention them. So coming to kingdoms. And so beginning with that during marking, some teachers are very strict. As long as it's a name of a kingdom, the K will have to be capital and the name of the kingdom will have to start with a capital letter. So let's name them now. We start with the kingdom in which we are all in, the human beings. We are in, remember we are animals as well, so we are in kingdom. The K has to be capital. Kingdom. Animalia. See? K capital, A capital. That's the first kingdom. We have another kingdom. Plantae. This is generally meaning for plants. Kingdom Plantae. Capital K, capital P. Then you go to kingdom Monera. This is generally for bacteria for the kingdom Monera. You go to kingdom Fungi. This is basically the fungi you get in this classification, maybe like yeast. Yeast is an example here. Here we have an example of bacteria, example of plants, animals. And now we go to the last kingdom. That's kingdom Protoctista. Protoctista. Have a look at the initials. K capital, P capital. Kingdom Protoctista. Now here we're going to talk about some protozoa like amoeba, paramecium, and such. So that's basically the 5 kingdoms in a summary, or in a nutshell. So you may take a screenshot of that as well. It may be useful in your journey ahead. So now we are done with the units of classification. These are the one, don't worry about them. You are going to study them deeper in classification 2 at form 3. So generally that's about it in units of classification. Now we go to the last part of the lesson today. We are going to study about the binomial nomenclature. Binomial nomenclature. So guys, binomial nomenclature is what I'm talking about. Binomial nomenclature. So remember that these organisms, each organism has been given a scientific name. But generally, the language that was mostly used, maybe that's something that can be said, but just listen. So the language that was generally used in classification of organisms or naming of organisms, it was Latin. Why? One of the reasons as why Latin was used in naming the organisms is because Latin is a dead language. Like, it's not subjected to many changes. It has been there for a long period of time, so it's been refined. So there are not many changes that occur in Latin language. So that's the one reason why it was used as the language used in naming of organisms. It's a dead language, not subjected to many changes. The second reason why it was used is the language for naming organisms is because it was, at that time, it was the language that was most widely used. So many scientists all over the world could understand each other in naming the organism. So when I say Panthera leo, you're gonna get it. Yeah, you're talking about the lion, something like that. So that's about it. Now, what's binomial nomenclature? From that by. So binomial nomenclature is a set of rules that came about by used in the double naming system of organisms. Each organism has two names. One of the name is a genus name, and the other name is a species name. So in writing these two names, a set of rules was developed. That's what we call the binomial nomenclature. A set of rules, let me just write it here. It's a set of rules governing the double naming system of organisms. It's a set of rules governing the double naming systems of organisms. So I'm gonna take an example of the housefly. The scientific name for housefly is Musca domestica. That's the scientific name for housefly. So now, what are the set of rules? When writing these names, you have to be very keen. We say the first name is a genus name. The second name is a species name. So what are the rules? Whenever you are writing the name, the first name, which is a generic name, must start with a capital letter. Here, look at this. First name must start with a capital letter. That's the generic name. It must start with a capital letter. That's one of the rules. While, okay, it's mainly joined. This one you say like the first name, which is the generic name, must start with a capital letter, while the rest is written in small letters, or while the species name is written in small letters. You can look at this. After you've written this first name in capital letter, all the rest are in small letters. So say the first name, which is the generic name, is written in a capital letter, while the rest are in small letters. Now after that, the second rule for binomial nomenclature, for this double naming system, is that the names must be written and when handwritten, like in this case I've written it like manually. When handwritten, the names must be underlined separately. Look at this. Separately. There are two different names. Underline them separately. That's the second rule. Underline them separately. Must be underlined separately. Musca domestica. That's the second rule. And now, the third rule. When written in italics, for example, take a case in which in books obviously it's not handwritten. You'll get it written in italics. Italics is like, it's like something like this. Okay. Like it will be slant. Something of the sort. So when written in, or when typed, it should be written in italics. In the case that it is typed, it should be written in italics. So that's the third rule for binomial nomenclature. If you know those, you are good to go on the binomial nomenclature system. So Musca domestica, genus name, species name, first letter is written in the capital letter, that's the generic name, or the rest in small letters, they are underneath separately, and capital letter, yeah, italics. That's all about binomial nomenclature. So guys, we've done the classification one. That's the second topic of biology. So you can like, subscribe and share for more. And so maybe you can leave some comments on maybe areas that you may want us to clarify more, or something like that. But I hope you guys have a good time, and I hope it has helped or something. Yeah, thank you.